Wow, that's a small world. Sometimes I get
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। ਅਸੀਂ ਹੁਣ ਆਪਣਾ ਸੈਕੰਡ ਸੈਸ਼ਨ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰਨ ਲੱਗੇ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਇਸ ਸੈਸ਼ਨ ਨੂੰ ਚੇਅਰ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਨ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਗਰੂ ਗ੍ਰੰਥ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ from Santa Cruz University. He really doesn't need an introduction for this audience. He is now professor of 6 studies at Santa Cruz University and also dean of the economics department. So he has been very, very active in 6 circles there in the Bay Area ever since I was born here, almost 25 years now. So I request him to come and introduce the speaker and start the next session. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I'd like to, for those of you who came in a little late, I'd just like to again acknowledge with great thanks the organization of this conference by the Chutnikala Foundation and the Guru Granth Sahib Sanjay. This is extremely important, of course, to bridge this gap between the six centuries that have passed since Guru Nanak came into this world, and also we're halfway around the world. And I think what is amazing is, and I think those of you who are here in the morning session would have gotten that same sense as me, that how relevant that message is for this modern time and different place. The core message of Gurbani speaks to us in our present circumstances and also gives us a guide in terms of thinking about what we should do in the society we live in. So I'd like to thank all of you for taking time out on a weekend to come to this. It is really, really important that we meet like this collectively and have this vichar. And I really want to express my appreciation. I teach in university, and it's really important for our young people that we focus on these things, making Sikhi relevant for them as they live their lives going forward. I know that you have programs here and you can read the introductions, but I know this is also being audio broadcast. I'd like to acknowledge that there may be many listeners on the internet, and so I'm going to read the full introductions for the benefit of those listeners. Our first speaker is Sardani Meeta Kaur, and she's the managing editor of the Sikh Love Stories Project, a storytelling project that reveals the inner lives of Sikh American women and men exploring love in revolutionary ways. She's a creative writer who is committed to the literary arts and the power of stories. Kaur has written for NPR, Hyphen Magazine, Sikh Chic, and Asian Week. Kaur was also awarded the Hedgebrook Residency for Fiction and the Elizabeth George Grant for Fiction. Kaur loves spending time with her family, cooking, swimming, traveling, and exploring her spirituality. She is currently exploring a fantasy novel that draws upon characters with Sikh roots, the global world, and our diseased food supply. Very interesting set of issues. And the official title of her talk is How the Guru Granth Sahib Looks at the Relationship Between Free Will and Destiny. Though I got a sneak peek at her slides, and I think she has a punchier title coming up. Okay. Please welcome Sardani Meeta Kaur.
You've got to move it down.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
just going to set my own timer, so
रॉड मुंह के सामने आ रही है
respect your
रॉड ये मुंह के सामने आ रही है
time
दैट्स
limit.
व्हाई चलो कितनी सी हाउ कैन शी स्पीक नो
Great, thank you.
Slideshow.
Okay, great. I want to, yeah, we're good.
Full screen.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so I want to thank all the organizers. I'm very happy to be here. I'm humbled by all the speakers, such great mentors of knowledge and continual learning. So thank you. I'm gonna just go ahead and start. I've been wrangling with this concept of free will versus destiny, or free will and destiny, or if the two concepts are even related or intertwined and how they work. And my methodology is, there's a little bit of a story there. I read some articles, they were very abstract and vague, and while the concepts were good to look at and analyze, I landed upon storytelling as a method by which to look at this concept. So let's go ahead and start. I want to recognize my privilege as a Sikh American writer, okay? And I have the time and the energy to be looking at these concepts where so many men and women are working hard to just survive in this economy. I have the luxury of time to look at this. So I really have to make sure my talks are applicable and have practical application, that they're not just these conversations that we have and evaporate into thin air. So there is a practical application that we need to think about. Eleanor Roosevelt says, freedom makes a huge requirement of every human being. With freedom comes responsibility. For the person who is unwilling to grow up, the person who does not want to carry his or her own weight, that is a frightening prospect. There's another one by Helen Keller. We'll just get to the questions. And so these are the questions I'm looking at. Is there a relationship between free will and destiny according to the Guru Granth Sahib? How do free will and destiny work together in our lives as Sikhs? And can free will impact predetermined karma that is in play? I also intervene with the question, how does love shape our destinies as Sikhs? So, the methodology we will use to have this discussion is I'm going to engage in a storytelling exercise. I have received permission from this individual to tell this story. He was very encouraging and he told me to tell it with great zest and zeal. And then we will reflect on the patterns in the story to look at the questions that were previously mentioned. I am looking at these concepts through my own biases, so I just want to put that out there, and we can further examine these concepts in the Q&A. Every voice counts. So with that, I want you to close your eyes, and I'm going to tell you a story. And the reason I want you to close your eyes is so you can visualize and feel and not get distracted by the environment. Okay? In 1940, in the village of Kotli in Gurdaspur, Balwant Kaur and Tara Singh gave birth to a baby boy, the youngest of 4 children in their family. They named him Tanna Singh, and they had great hopes for their baby boy as they did the rest of their children. Tara Singh and Balwant Kaur were simple people with a modest education and land to farm. Tanna Singh enjoyed the farm and wandered around playing with chickens and chasing birds as a toddler. His parents could not ask for more. As Thana Singh turned 2, Balwant Kaur started to have daily headaches and did not think much of it until one day she fell gravely ill and was bedridden. She had pounding headaches, pulling her over thresholds of pain she had never experienced. She had contracted meningitis, a fatal bacterial infection. At the age of 3, Thana Singh remembers everyone gathering around his mother's body on her manji, but he could no longer understand in that moment that she was no longer with him. His mother's death would change the course of his life. The family assigned Balbir Kaur, Thana Singh's older 7-year-old sister, to take care of him. She bathed him and made sure he had roti and dal to eat, but both children were off-center, aimless, even in their playful pursuits. Thana Singh remembers sleeping on stacks of wheat at night, piled up in the courtyard to protect their harvest from thieves. He remembers the stars in the Kotli sky and how close they felt. He imagined standing up on his tiptoes to reach out and touch them on top of those heaps of wheat. He also remembers his older brother carrying him on his shoulders across the irrigated fields so his feet did not touch the mud. The harvest passed and Thana Singh turned 8. Thana Singh received word that his brother-in-law, Thana Singh's Mamaji, was ready to take this young boy into his home to educate him, ensure the best opportunities for advancement. Thana Singh was about to be thrust into a world of his own, without mother or father, an orphan. One can only speculate that Thana Singh, an illiterate farmer from Kotli, had the foresight and intelligence to let his youngest Singh go to pursue a life beyond their farm, beyond what he himself could offer his youngest son, not knowing that all he really needed was his father. Thana Singh released his youngest son to his brother-in-law and never looked back. Thana Singh understood what it was to be alone at the age of 10. His Mamaji enforced that his efforts and his actions would determine his fate. So he was groomed like a racehorse to study and absorb as much knowledge as possible. When he entered college, his Mamaji switched his track from engineering to medicine, and Thana Singh accepted without question. He was already 3 months behind all of his classmates, but he applied himself 16 to 18 hours a day and moved up from the ranks, from the 200th student to the 130th to the 75th, the 23rd, and then number 3. Eventually, he was the first in his medical school class. At his residency training, he met the love of his life, and then both of them migrated to America. Life was good. Thana Singh's work paid off. When they first landed in the United States, the US government asked Thana Singh to be a medic in Vietnam. He in turn asked the government to reconsider, since his wife was pregnant with a baby girl and was about to give labor. The government redirected him to Lake Preston, South Dakota, a small German-American town that welcomed their new doctors with open arms. The townspeople of Lake Preston asked Thana Singh, "Please send us your belongings ahead of time." He said, "Of course," without question. He did not know them. He knew nothing about them, but he went ahead anyways. The townspeople received their furniture, their dishes, their clothes and linens from the moving company. When Thana Singh and Harsha Kaur arrived, they were stunned to see a house that was fully furnished, organized, and waiting for the owners to take possession and make it a home. They were then blessed with another gift, their baby boy. Thana Singh had fond memories of teaching his daughter how to ride a bike, having picnics in the backyard with his wife and kids, and enjoying the town's functions as a special guest. As time passed, the couple grew weary of being the only Sikh family in town. They craved the company of Sangat, so they moved to California. The move to Yuba City, California was in sharp contrast to Lake Preston, and Thana Singh's family did not adjust easily. There was something thick in the air that could not be described or articulated, and while they were surrounded by more Sikhs than ever, somehow the family was a fish out of water. Yet Thana Singh saw the potential to help a city full of Punjabi Sikhs as a doctor. Thana Singh buried himself in work, and his daughter started to miss her father, the checker games, the bike rides, and simply getting to know who he was. Then time passed, and Thana Singh's children saw him less and less. He committed himself to working day and night without stop to fulfill what he thought was his primary role as a father, to provide financial resources for his children. As the children saw Thana Singh less and less, His children, like their father, witnessed a death, a passing of their own father. He no longer existed for them, even though they would pass him in the hallway on the way to their bedrooms. When his daughter turned 18, Thana Singh had his first heart attack. They met at the hospital, and his daughter stayed there for a week, hoping this man she did not know anymore would live, because technically he was still her father. Thana Singh chalked up hospitalization as just needing more time to rest in between his shifts. He recovered and went back to work at full speed. Time passed again, and when his daughter turned 27, he had his second heart attack. This time the cardiologist recommended a quintuple bypass and to stop working altogether. Thana Singh took pause. He now understood that his heart clamoring for him to slow down almost cost him his life. The people in the waiting room, his wife, daughter, and son, were essentially strangers to him. He paused and paused some more. 3 months had passed since his second heart attack, and he determined that in order to survive, he had to change how he was fundamentally living. He started the journey of reconnecting to his wife, children, but this was no easy task. They resisted, rejected, and did not trust his attempts. They were relentless about announcing his crimes against a family, his absence. He wasn't around for 15 years, so what could he expect? He somehow developed the patience and tolerance and humility to listen to all their grievances, their problems, their struggles of his emotional absence from the family. He listened to all of it and listened more. He kept calling and kept visiting his children to stay in touch no matter what. It didn't matter how angry they were. It didn't matter that they did not understand him or that he or understood that like everything else. He kept trying. He kept pruning the trees to bear fruit. He did this for 5 years, and then his health caught up with him again. 6 years had passed, and Thana Singh found himself experiencing chest pains again and landed back in the hospital where his daughter was now 33 with a son-in-law, son, and wife. This time the doctor recommended a double bypass, and Thana Singh understood he had to even make more adjustment if he wanted to live. Then one day, his wife stated, quietly, gently, "How could you know? How could you know how to love when you did not have a mother to show you what love was as a child?" And with that, his family members started to finally understand him. As his children learned more and more about his history, who he was, they understood. After all, he was a horse, breeded to win, to be successful, to perform no matter what. He was also a horse with no mother or father to speak of when he skinned his knee, was bullied by a classmate, or in need of money. How he lived is what he knew. He persevered without a roadmap or even a landmark through an emotional terrain he never experienced with his family. It was long, difficult, and arduous, but then Thana Singh paid back his karmic debt to his family through learning how to love and establish an unconditional bond with each of them. The seeds were there in that he never doubted he couldn't, and when things were tough, he used each moment as a teacher. He determined he had to stick it out no matter what, and every one of them for the next 15 years to repay his debt. Today he enjoys balanced and centered life with his family and grandchildren, and thanks Waheguru every day for giving him the opportunity to learn how to love. Because Thana Singh had the capacity and the courage to grab destiny's hand each time it was offered to him, his grandchildren demand his presence every moment. Bananti and Siddiq, his grandchildren, are the recipients of all the riches he accumulated in his heart. Thank you for listening. How was that for everyone? Okay, so we'll get on to the discussion. I don't have much time, and I'll do my best. If you haven't figured it out already, Thana Singh is my father. I am obsessed with his life because I find it remarkable, and he's the greatest teacher for me. So he, with great zeal, said, please use my my life story in hopes of it impacting or making a difference for someone else. Just quickly, the defining moments for Tana Singh was his mother passing away at the age of 2. He lost his primary bond. His father sending him to his Mamaji's home for education at the age of 8, and coming to America to practice medicine. 3 defining moments as an adult. 3 heart attacks. 3 heart attacks signaling you must change the way you're living. And so this is where Guru Granth Sahib starts to come into the picture. Forgive me, I did not go for the Gurmukhi. I'm still a student in this regard, and thanks to the Khalsa school, I still have access to education. But I'm going to go with the English translations. And so, Guru Arjan Dev Ji on page 460 says, "O Nanak, only your action shall go with you. Only your action shall go with you. The consequences of your actions cannot be erased." If we look at this in accordance to the story, Tana Singh decided to study 16 to 18 hours a day, building up his destiny to become a doctor. Success begets success. Now, if you look at the same quote, he chose, because of his predetermined circumstance of losing his mother, he chose success and money over developing his relationships with his wife and children. His decisions caught up with him, and in the form of heart attacks and his karmic debt as a householder. Now we can look at this again. There's another quote from the Guru Granth Sahib, Guru Nanak Dev Ji, page 1342. "According to one's desires, one's condition is determined." So, I believe that this is proof that we are creating our own destinies in every moment, and that Waheguru keeps giving us a chance upon chance upon chance to get it right. It is in our hands. There is no predetermined path. There is no jail sentence that Waheguru is giving to us, okay? If we have circumstances that are challenging, it is up to us to rise to the occasion and change those circumstances through our free will and decision making. Let me just get to the notes. If we look, just to go back for a second, if we look, there's one track in his life, this character's life, is that he determined his professional destiny. He determined it in every moment he chose to study and do the right thing. The predetermined track were the circumstances that were given to him as a child. He was motherless, and then he became fatherless. And that in itself was a karma that started to take place, and he based his decisions on it. Now, it wasn't his fault, but he still needed to learn the lessons he needed to learn to get out of that karma, out of that predetermined karma according to circumstance, not according to what Waheguru is issuing to us. It was circumstance, and that's all it was. So, I don't have much time, so let me just try to get to the points that are relevant. We understand destiny as a passive state, again, as receiving some jail sentence. And we can see that through the quotes in the Guru Granth Sahib, this is not the case. This is not the case at all. Waheguru has given us the power, okay, to determine our actions in every moment. Let me see. Here we go. So and I think this is the linchpin for Tana Singh's life. This is the linchpin. And this is where we look at, okay, we understand that, destiny is not a passive state that's handed down to us. We understand that circumstances can be tough, and that we may have tracks where we have control, and there's tracks where we don't have control. But what makes the difference here is that he laid himself down as a rug. He stripped himself of his degrees, his social status, his financial status to establish unconditional bonds with his family members. And he understood that he needed to learn the virtues of love to do that. Humility, patience, understanding. Why are these people so upset? I don't understand, right? And when he was exhibiting those virtues of love, his family members in turn developed that empathy. And when developing that empathy, they understood, how could you know how to love? You had no mother, you had no father. You were breeded as a racehorse. And that was, I'll just keep going for it, and then I'll end. This was critical, and I think the recipe he used, which is a recipe we can all use, is Nam Japo. Be around Sangat, write Sangat, and then Guru's grace. He stood on that radical edge of courage as a man in today's society, Punjabi American society, where masculinity is held up as the highest status. And he said, this is not working. I gotta do something else. And he did. And I find that to be extremely courageous, not because he's my father, but because his actions as an individual, as someone I know, as a spirit and a soul that I'm traveling with. I also think he took great introspection, which is also free will. Free will, the decision to stop and pause and, what am I doing? What am I exhibiting here? What am I doing wrong? How can I change it? How can I change it? So what seems like a contradiction by this quote, which I think is highly misinterpreted, by one's own actions nothing can be done, destiny was predetermined from the very beginning. By great good fortune I meet my God, and then all pain of separation departs. I think that we are the creators of this destiny. And there's no one to blame, and there's no one to pin, and we can't say, oh, hi, why Guru did this to me? No, we are creating it. Our thoughts, our actions, our predetermined circumstances, we are creating it. And we also have the power to get out of it. I'll make one more point and then I'm done. Why was it important for Tanna Singh to learn how does love play a role in free will and destiny? How does love play a role? Well, I believe that, I don't have my notes. Okay. I believe that, why is love important to this equation? Why? Because I think it gives us the power to become who we are meant to be, to change the course of our destiny. It gives us the power. The virtues of humility and understanding and patience and forgiveness gives us the power to change the course of our destiny. And I would just like to close by saying, oh, so sorry. I would just like to close by saying that as Sikhs, I believe that we are not only taught to love our families unconditionally, but also love humanity unconditionally. When we understand our duty, our destiny as the ability to love and serve humanity unconditionally, we can restore the vision of the world that the Gurus blueprinted 500 years ago. I think it's remarkable that we're coming from a tradition and a scripture that tells us not only do we have to extend unconditional love to our family members and neighbors and community, we have to do it for strangers. And we may never meet these strangers. We may never meet them, but it is our duty as Sikhs to do it. It is our duty. And our duty, our destiny as Sikh Americans, it's critical that we understand our duty and purpose to not only shape the next generation, but to establish our positions in the world as guardians of these central tenets of human and civil rights around the world. Thank you.
We have time up to 10 minutes for questions. If there are questions, I'll take them on the cards. Sorry, I should have said it earlier that there are cards available for writing questions. If there are no questions, we can take them. Somebody can ask a verbal question. Can I make some comments? Please, in the form of a question, if possible. Yeah, please.
I did not have a pen, so but I made some point, want to make a point that there is some, the whole issue of destiny and free will is an old philosophical point, has been there for centuries and centuries. So, and I was only making the point that the issue of free will versus destiny is a big philosophic point going on for centuries, both in the East and the West, right? And there is some modern insight on it. And your presentation, I think, was very wonderful. It brought out many ideas. The story was very meaningful. And the issue of love as a problem-solving mechanism, I think, was very, very great. But I think there is a certain kind of parallel in the modern movements, which is the issue of nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
That the nature belongs to the side of destiny, and nurture belongs to the side of free will. And the scientific insight comes from that nature is based on genetics and nurture is based on our own efforts and free will and the societal effort in teaching us and the tradition that humans are that we follow.
I think that's a great angle and lens for this discussion. So thank you, Uncle G. Yeah.
I have a comment also.
Sure.
I think you quoted one passage from Guruji there, where he says that we can do nothing. I think what Guruji implies there is, we should always seek the grace of life. Finally, we are responsible for our action. We have been given the Vivek book to think what is right, what is wrong, and do things, and that's where our free will comes. But again, for the success for our actions, we should pray. And I think your father was an object person, so I'm sure he had the grace.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point. I was referring to it as a recipe that was given to us. We need all these ingredients along with free will to make sure we're on this path to reaching our highest potential as Sikhs and as human beings. So we're in agreement. Thank you, Uncle.
So we have two more questions. One, please.
Thank
If
you.
you would mind, you could identify yourself.
Oh, I'm Sangeeta Luthra, and thank you, Meeta,
Keep
for
it
your talk.
closer.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you can talk about writing as a kind of tool in the process of understanding, writing as, just understanding destiny and free will and the balance that you're trying to describe here. And it struck me that, the Guru's main tool for conveying their beliefs to us was writing, the word, Shabad. So there's a lot of synergy with what you do as a writer, and I was wondering if you can just talk about that for a few minutes.
Sure. I don't have a complete answer. What comes to mind is what Nikki Didi was referring to. You could call this imaginary or delusional, but I live in a state of darshan, where visions are constantly coming to me in the state of imagination or delusion. It depends on the day. But I think what happens is that I think we all have that power of creativity in us, and those messages are constantly being sent to us. My medium by which I explore it is writing. For others, it could be visual painting, it could be teaching children, it could be acting, it could be solving an engineering problem. And I think that in those creative moments, I think we really need to respect ourselves, because that is a chance to grab hold of something magical that Waheguru is sending to us, and it's our free will that let's take advantage of this moment and let's see where it leads us. And in reference to that story I told, I think it was quite remarkable that my dad had the trust to trust these German Americans he never met and just go along with the program, because I think he was listening to himself intuitively, instinctually, and he said, things look right. Let me go with it. Let my mind not mess up this opportunity. And so I think there's a radar, a GPS in us that's very intuitive. And I trust it much more than my mind. So Thank you, Sangeeta. I hope that helps.
Last question.
I do not know whether it's a question or summarizing what you said. I'm just trying to clarify my own mind.
Sure.
What I understood from your talk was that whatever we are getting now at present or in the near future is the result of previous karmas. And that you must have according to Guru. That you cannot escape. But what you said was that we can change our future through, we have the free will in that aspect to change our actions and change our destiny for the future. And similarly, what you are saying is that if we act collectively as a group or even individually to change the lives of others, to change the destiny of others, maybe we can also be successful. Is that the summary of what you said?
Yeah, that was beautifully stated, Uncle G. I'm just so convinced that Waheguru and the Gurus have given us this power, this individual empowerment through free will, and this recipe of Nam Japna, Gird Karo and Vad Japna, and Guru's grace, that when we keep tapping into that recipe, when we keep trusting ourselves, that in every second we have a choice to make a right decision, make a righteous action, that imagine the power Waheguru and the Gurus have given us as a collective society. We could end poverty. We could end racial discrimination in this country. We could do so much. And I think it begins with us each trusting ourselves and our ability to make good choices in every moment. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Meeta. Bole.